Welcome to Terror in Tandem, a podcast about finding entertainment in the macabre, hosted by the knowledgeable and lovable Laura and Richard Mathiasen. Each episode, we discuss the horror genre, from books to film to TV and beyond, sometimes even from the beyond. You can find us on YouTube at Terror in Tandem, on Instagram at Terror in Tandem, and you'll always find our latest and greatest internationally revered episode on our website, terrorintandem.com.
Award-winning asterisk future.
Listen, it is internationally known.
It is.
But
yeah.
I've been known to rock the microphone.
Absolutely. You're killing it.
I am. And you know what else is killing it? Mm-hmm. Our episode.
Absolutely.
Killing it out there.
Listen, I'm just happy to be out of the cellar, folks, now that the sun is out.
Every time you mention the cellar, that gets you another week. You know this.
I did know that. I do know the rules.
And you keep crying for public help.
I think
Every time you mention the podcast, the cellar on the podcast, we get, there it goes. Phone lines are lighting up. I don't know if it's concerned citizens.
Everyone, I'm just kidding. Obviously, please help me. Please help me.
So what are we talking about today on this, our episode inching towards our 100th episode?
Yes.
Just a note, 100th episode is coming and it's going to be a special one, folks.
It's going to be a banger. I don't like this at all. This is one of the few things, let me rephrase that. This is one of the many things that scares me, but on the list of things that scares me, I am legit very afraid of this.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I really fear what we're about to talk about.
I have no strong feelings whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't like it.
I think it's a disturbing topic, but I think it's less about the actual topic that is disturbing for me and more about what happens to the people.
I'm glad we're being so vague about what we're about to talk about, considering it's also in the episode title.
Yeah.
But
we're going to talk about infections.
Infections. Ew. Gross. You really need to get that
in real life, infections are really gross, can be deadly. So make sure you don't let that, cut or wound go too long.
Like my grandpa used to say, rub dirt in it. Don't.
But the actual concept of horror films that revolve around infections aren't as horrific to me, again, as I mentioned, as what happens to the people in this, societal breakdown of infections.
Oh, so what scares you more than the disease itself is the effect it has on, like,
how people
civilization
react to it.
Oh, yeah. It's all part of it. But actually, primarily, I am talking about the virus that, makes you poop your brains out until you die.
Yeah. Listen, I'm scared of getting it in real life, but, sometimes watching it on film, lessens that fear a little bit.
Oh, gives me the heebie McJeebies.
So, yeah. We're going to talk about all kinds of infections.
Yay!
Today.
Well, listen, you're often stepping outside of your comfort zone in sacrifice to the blood gods who command we do this pod. So, it's only fair that I squish and squirm in my seat a little bit watching these goopy disease movies.
We've already talked about a lot of movies that could fit this. We just talked about the eco horror, The Ruins, that could definitely fit into this. The Thing, could definitely fit into this.
It's kind of a loose definition, isn't it? Anything that can be transmitted is kind of like a virus in a way,
And we are really leaving out vampires and werewolves.
Agreed.
And zombies. And because we've covered those topics. There's more, so we could cover more of them in our part 2.
Content, people.
Yeah.
Never ending.
But I did want to talk about how infectious disease has been a pretty big part of literature and now into, visual art and film.
Yes.
Since I don't know, since Babylonian and Hebrew texts.
Yeah,
honestly.
basically, since we learned how to write and then looked to our left and someone was dying of bubonic plague.
In medieval times, there were stories of vampires and werewolves often having a contagion element to it. So it was essentially brought by infection. And the Victorian horror centered around fear of infection and contamination. Think of those death doctors with the death masks.
The plague doctors with the beaks.
Exactly.
Everyone's
alone,
favorite Halloween costume / horror video game NPC.
So the exact nature of the final biblical plague remains sort of a mystery. And maybe influenza, strep, cholera, that took out a lot of Egyptians back in the day and still does to this day.
I think it's the disease that makes everyone stop dancing.
Also
known as
the footloose disease.
The footloose disease.
It's in the Bible. Is your foot loose, but it eventually falls off.
Well, yeah, it's footloose mixed with leprosy. So
footloose and foot free.
Finally, we've come a long way, baby.
The Bronze Age started to really talk about beasts and plagues that afflicted populations and emerging cultures bringing in their own germs. And
there were several notable outbreaks of bubonic plague in Rome, in the Roman Empire, that killed scores and scores of people.
So many people.
Yeah, I mean, when we mention the Black Death and the bubonic plague, we think about the outbreak in Europe in the Middle Ages, but there were some during old Roman times that were gnarly as fuck.
Well, if we think about the etymology of horror fiction as a literary genre, with Grimm's fairy tales and Frankenstein and the Vampire by John Polidori.
Right, it's spelled with a Y, isn't it? Or Wampir or something.
Wampir.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I read that so long ago when I was a kid, and look, it's an interesting piece of historical fiction, but it's dry. Yeah,
I mean the industrial age really bore out these ideas, and
largely
there was an increased focus on contagion.
Yes, because people were flocking to the cities and living in close quarters in unsanitary conditions and giving each other cholera and tuberculosis and plague.
In 1897, concerns over health and political crises bubbled over, and a new era of horror fiction and then horror movies started to take infectious themes on and go run with them.
It's definitely one of the oldest human fears.
Well, yeah,
because we've
always happened.
Yes, exactly. It's been with us from the very start. And there's also, I mean, look, anyone who's ever had norovirus can attest to how much control you have over your body when this microscopic organism decides it's time to go, which is none. You have none.
I mean,
you're laid low, you're humbled, it's a violation. Like, you're taken over.
So let's bring you all up to a more contemporary filmatic history in the 1970s, and the theme of infestation.
Ooh, yeah.
With David Cronenberg's Shivers from 1975. It focused on...
Is that his first movie? I feel like that might have been
probably
his first
you
movie.
would know.
Yeah.
It centered on an unconventional researcher who bred a parasitic organism that invaded and caused uncontrollable sexual desire in the host.
Unconventional research comes up a lot with Cronenberg.
Yeah. And Rabid is basically about the premise of having rabies, but it created an illness and body dysmorphia where the host seduced victims and killed them with her bite.
Yeah, it was notably starring then adult film legend Marilyn Chambers.
I think it was a biting vagina.
Yes. So. It is, well... It's a David Cronenberg movie, so, it's goopy and sexual.
Then we move into Alien, and its sequels and the prequel that came out in 2012. But
Prometheus.
Yes. It really
the movie
is
everyone loves.
an example of parasitic terror in alien form, xenomorph.
Yeah.
That would infect the body of a human host, grow, and eventually burst forth gruesomely.
Yeah. Quite gruesomely. Yeah.
Yeah. Into a hungry adult pupa. So, that was something. We are still going through our Edgar Allan Poe deep dive, of which we're going to talk about The Mask of the Red Death.
I was gonna mention it for this episode, but I'm like, no, we're definitely gonna talk about it in our next postulment.
Good one. And movie and book depictions of pathogens prior to 1970s were more like pestilence, like The Seventh Seal.
Ooh,
which
with Demi Moore?
on no, prior to the 70s.
Oh, with the
1957.
I'm sorry, that's The Seventh Sign.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's Ingmar Bergman with Max
Yes.
von Sydow.
It was humanity
It's
and
a great movie. Death.
mortality during the time of the Black Death.
Yeah, Max von Sydow plays a knight that plays chess with
Death.
the figure of death.
Yeah. John Sturgis's 1965 film, The Satan Bug, was one of the first depictions of a modern plague. It modernized the theme with a virus stolen from a top secret government lab.
Just an aside about the Satan bug, the satanic panic. I grew up in the 80s on Long Island, and I want to mention that it was all real, and it was me, and I am the one. I caught the Satan bug. All the parents were right. Reagan was right.
You're just admitting to crimes.
No, I mean, I'm...
Because a lot of people were killed during
No,
this
just
time.
one person.
Well,
I think.
a boy, right?
Yeah, that wasn't me.
Oh,
I just mean I'm the devil.
Now you're trying to wiggle out of it.
Ruh-roh.
Like a parasite, trying to wiggle out of its host.
You have to stop watching The Bay over and over again. I don't know why you keep watching it.
I would say most notably, and sort of the thing that I think of in literature, modern literature, is 1969, Michael Crichton's book,
The Andromeda Strain.
Andromeda Strain.
I love that
And then
book.
later a movie directed by Robert Wise.
Wild enough, that movie, Robert Wise is a great director. That movie's rated G. But don't let that turn you off. It's really good.
It's basically focusing on the after effects of an alien pathogen picked up by a satellite as it returns to Earth. And then we have biowarfare experiments, threat of nuclear explosion. I mean, does any of this scare you or sound familiar?
All of it scares me. As I mentioned, it all scares me, especially the biowarfare shit. The idea that someone will, take an existing deadly disease and tweak it so that it's worse. No, fuck you.
This also started showing scenes of scientists and physicians using bioprotective equipment, where we see in real life during SARS and COVID and Ebola and all those things.
Yeah.
And then we have worldwide pandemics, including 12 Monkeys, Outbreak, Mimic, all in the 90s, and then Contagion in 2011, which echoed the SARS epidemic and, most recently, the COVID pandemic.
Right. Starring all of us.
Yes. So I just want to let you know that it's been going on for a long time. Infections, infectious diseases, and
that's
the horror surrounding it.
That's why it shows up so many times in popular culture, because we all know people that have died of diseases, and we have all ourselves gotten diseases that, hopefully we've overcome. So it's the worst.
But what we're saying is there are all kinds of infections that you can get. So take those probiotics and don't rub dirt in the wounds.
No, I think in thinking about this, what I can trace back my fear of diseases to when I was a teenager. I read Richard Preston's book, The Hot Zone, which is a nonfiction account of Marburg and Ebola outbreaks in Africa, which are hemorrhagic fevers. which make you do things like sweat blood and poop blood and cry blood and barf blood until you die. So it's a very graphic and frightening book. It was loosely adapted as Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman and Rene Russo and all that.
They definitely did cry a lot.
Very,
of
very
blood.
loose. But the book itself scared the absolute pants off me. And then I read like Serpent and the Rainbow and other stuff. And like I also went to Catholic school, so sex ed consisted of an octogenarian nun passing around like a 500-page picture book of close-ups of private parts in various stages of venereal disease. So, you know, like you're 15 years old flipping through that, and this old lady who's scary on her own is talking about sex, and it imprints.
Well, the thing about infections in horror, or the horroring of infections in my mind, would be you know, getting something that you can't see but you know is there. So, for example, scabies.
Yeah.
That's
what I'm talking
gross.
about.
And
how do you fight it?
Yeah.
You can't punch it.
And the other
go-to.
thing too is from Wrath of Khan.
Oh, the
earwig.
The ear slug.
Called an earwig
because
it is actually a thing that exists in the world.
Yeah, but that's not an earwig.
No, but things crawling into your ears.
You don't like that.
And
yeah,
like
what about noses?
Hatching eggs? No, because I don't think it's as easy to get up to the nose.
So it's really the ear.
Yeah, crawling into your ear, hatching eggs, and then you eventually have to like have these things crawling out of your ear. That is scary, but that's less of an infection and more of our bug
infestation.
Episode.
Yeah,
gross.
Oh, can't wait for that one.
I can. Infections aren't as scary to me as they are to you. Bugs, scary.
Yeah. Well, listen. Everybody's scared of something, and some of us are scared of everything. So I kind of broke down infectious.
Aww. Oh, I thought you meant you broke down in tears.
Oh, on a daily basis. But I broke down infectious horror into some subcategories that I want to kind of briefly run through before we, take our break.
Do it to it.
Yeah. So the first type of infectious horror I call Everyone is Dead. And that is when you enter the story, it's post-apocalypse. The infection has happened, and there's very little left, and we usually follow survivors or whatever. So, that's like most zombie movies. The Stand.
Well, don't give all your examples away. Because
no, these are just brief mentions. I'm not going to go deep into these.
And I have one already on my recommendation list that fits that category.
Excellent. So I think that's a very common type, especially in the last 20 years with like the boom of post-apocalyptic
I sort of
horror.
like those ones because I don't always need the backdrop, but
I do too. I mean,
like
sometimes
28 days later.
Sometimes,
right?
Well, they do explain where that comes from.
Yeah, but we do
it's
jump into
brief.
Everyone is Dead.
And The Stand is like the prologue is a very brief intro into where it comes from, but I get your point, and I agree with you. You don't need to spend a ton of time on the lore of it. Like in Night of the Living Dead, it's a brief mention on the radio that it's probably a disease that came off of a satellite that crashed to Earth, and then that's never brought up again.
Yeah, you see these aliens bringing their...
Like, who gives a shit? So the next category I have is My Weird Body, which fans of this fantastic podcast will remember.
Just think David Cronenberg.
Well, that's a story where it's a small, intimate tale that usually focuses on one person or a small group of people, and it really is a micro focus on the effects of a disease on the body. So, yeah, body horror, David Cronenberg, stuff like Rabid, Afflicted, Contracted. Where you're really seeing, like, the visceral effects of the disease on the body.
Quickly, too.
The next category I have is called We're Trapped in Here. This is like siege horror. A lot of zombie movies are like this too, but it's usually some group of survivors trying to stay uninfected, and a lot of times there's infection inside the house that they also have to deal with. So like Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Lots of zombie movies.
stuff.
Yeah. The Wreck franchise is fantastic. Splinter, Gaia, The Thing. Anyway, the next one is, I love this one, Infectious Curses. So this is a supernatural infection. And the reason I call it an infection is because it exists to spread.
Yeah.
And it to be passed along. And it is supernatural in nature. And some examples, one of them I'm saving for later, but Smile or It Follows. Follow that. Pulse is another one. And my last category is one that you're never going to like. And that's techno-organic infection. So where we've got a technology-based infection that gets into organic matter. So it's sort of body horror mixed with technophobia. Stuff like Tetsuo the Iron Man or Hardware or Cronenberg's Existenz. It's gross.
Yeah.
But, like wires and stuff coming out of the body. Like in Superman 3, only good. So that's my little breakdown of different kinds of infection horror.
Awesome.
Trademark pending.
What do you want to take a quick break and hop in the old decontamination shower chamber?
Yes.
We'll come back and record the rest of this after I put on calamine and cortisone.
Pouring the bleach into the power washer as we speak.
Do you have something to hide? Come on, we all do. But when the thing you want to hide is your malformed, damaged, or deranged face, then have we got the product for you. At Michael Myers Maskmongers, we have the fit and flair that will cover your most grotesque facial deformity. If you want to cover the thing of nightmares with something that inspires, well, new nightmares, head to one of our monger mills and choose the right mask for your reign of terror. Ghost-faced, clown-inspired, cherubic, or sport-themed masks, you have your choice of over 1,000 options. With our quadruple M guarantee, you will be delighted to inspire fear in everyone you encounter and maintain your own horrific anonymity. This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. We do not condone nor endorse murder of any kind, no matter how cool your mask looks.
Oh, God, I wish I had worn goggles. Oh, my God, that hurts.
At least those eye worms will be killed off.
Oh, the whites of my eyes have never been whiter.
What's funny is that perfectly segues into my first. So I'm just going to run with it.
Perfect.
It's called Blindness.
I know this one.
It's both a book and a film.
Because
I'm going to first talk about the book.
I'm going to blow your mind for a second. I haven't seen the movie. I did read the book.
Yeah. I will talk about the book and the film. So it's written by Jose Saramago. He won the Nobel Prize for it. It was published in 1995. I believe he also wrote a follow-up called Sight.
I did not know that.
Seeing, maybe.
I've only read the first. It's very good. I mean, Nobel Prize winning good. So.
Yeah.
Richard says it's good.
This book is good.
Yeah, the Nobel
so this book is about a man who suddenly loses his vision and causes an accident. Then blindness begins to spread throughout the population, causing a shift in the world and how limited accessibility to see is actually the horror of this disease. There's a city and a government with people, but the city doesn't belong to any country. The people don't really have names, and so it's meant to be a universal understanding of the possibility of this happening anywhere to anyone.
It's not bogged down by ideology or nationalism or any bullshit.
All the afflicted are put into hospitals, which are more like camps and prisons.
Yeah.
The military turns against civilians. Women begin to be treated even worse than they are normally in evolved society. And the book, I will say, is a bit difficult to get through. It could be in the translation because I believe it's Portuguese originally into English. But there are multiple speakers and sprawling paragraphs. Sometimes it makes it hard to follow who's speaking to whom, but maybe it lends itself to the chaos and breakdown of civilization.
So I actually know a little bit of Portuguese. Unfortunately, it all comes from Brazilian horror movies and Brazilian anti-fascist punk rock, so I can say none of it in polite company.
It's 100%, this book is 100% about the breakdown of society with the blindness pandemic as a backdrop.
What I love about the book is it shines a very, no pun intended, a very uncomfortable light on how we currently, outside of the book in the real world, treat people with disabilities.
Yeah, he describes the disaster's potential to bring out both the best and worst of people, which I feel like all
that is what a disaster does.
Do.
Yeah.
Misguided action from the city government to like a blinded doctor and his sighted wife who pretends she's blind just to stay by his side to help, to assist his efforts.
Is that Julianne Moore in the movie?
Yeah. So now I'm going to talk about the film, which it's pretty, I would say, a pretty accurate-ish. The book is much more violent, especially the violence against women. It's very graphic. It's very hard to read.
And it's hard to read, I think, especially because it is quite plausible.
Yes. Which is what makes it scary to me. So
exactly.
The film, stars Julianne Moore, Mark Ruffalo, which what's weird is I feel like I've been on a Mark Ruffalo kick of late, but like his old films.
You
have
his pre Marvel days. You've been watching some of his grown-up movies.
And Adam McKay movies too.
Yeah, that too.
Anyway, it's directed by Fernando Meirelles, who did City of God. And this film
everyone see that movie.
And this film, Blindness, came out in 2008. It is based on the book. And they get more into the white sickness in the film. They explain it more. It's called white sickness in the book because when you go blind, instead of everything turning black, everything turns white. So that's why it's not really understood right away, because traditionally when you go blind, everything turns black. This is like white blindness.
I thought white sickness was you stop seasoning your food and can't dance.
So it's, again, it spreads all across the globe and chaos ensues. What is really interesting is that this cast does a really good job of showing the breakdown of society, because Julianne Moore pretends that she's blind so that she can go to the hospital camp prisons.
Yeah.
With Mark Ruffalo, who's the doctor. Thank you for the correction. So she's pretending she's blind, but we actually can see through her still vision.
That in the book, it's some moments of real tension where she has to
prove
basically
that she's blind.
Well, pretend that she can't see the atrocities right in front of her.
Can't react.
Yeah,
it's
can't
very
react.
Hard, but we are being told what they are. We're also seeing it happen. And even so much as people not believing the early victims of this blindness, and it is contagious, so some people don't get it, like Julianne Moore doesn't ultimately get it. And I would say the book has sort of a happy-ish, not happy, but hopeful ending. But the violence, like I said, in the film version is very softened, probably to get through some ratings and things like that. The book is much harder and more dark and violent.
Have you noticed that violence in movies, it often gets... It has a harder time passing censors when it's a realistic depiction. It's not so much about like how much blood is in it. If it's goofy and stupid, you can pour buckets and buckets of blood and it'll still get an R rating. If it's like realistic violence, though, which is actually educational to the public of this is what war looks like. It's not one guy jumping through a window and
I'm okay
15.
with that, because some of the violence against women in the film didn't need to be shown as much as it was described in the book. A lot of women especially don't need to see that to understand what that violence is like.
I certainly understand that. Absolutely. I'm just saying, I think sometimes we gloss over or stylize violence to the point where it loses its impact.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure. So blindness, check out either the book if you really want to, read a Nobel Prize winning book. It is going to, I would say it's a page turner, but it's very literary. So it is going to take you some time to read. Again, as I mentioned, there are some paragraphs and the dialogue can be sometimes confusing. So just take your time and pace it out.
Drink a lot of water.
Or if you just want to shortcut it and watch the film, you'll still get the same concept of the infectious blindness and what it does to society.
Yeah. Protect those eyes, everybody. Is it my turn?
Yeah.
I am very excited to say that my next installment is now a franchise, and it's 28 Days Later. So this movie came out in 2002, directed by Danny Boyle, who was established and well-known, but still kind of early in his career. Trainspotting only came out in like 1997. So, and he had not done a horror movie, except for that dead baby scene in Trainspotting, which was like a horror movie. Yeah. So anyway, this movie it changed me. It changed the genre. It is an introduction to, I think for a lot of people, for Danny Boyle, the script by Alex Garland, who is making major waves now with Civil War, and has made some of our favorite stuff.
It's not what you think, everyone.
Yeah. It's an early effort with Cillian Murphy, Naomi Harris, and it's also got Brendan Gleeson and Christopher Eccleston. So it's a banger of a cast. But what really makes 28 Days Later, for those of you that haven't seen it, I will go to my grave arguing it's not a zombie movie because the people aren't dead. They are infected with a disease that we only know as rage. And we only know that from a very brief scene at the beginning of the movie where a bunch of eco-terrorists break into a lab where monkeys are being infected with rage, and it gets out. So the scary thing about this is it's transmitted through fluids, and it takes only like 30 seconds to incubate. So you get it, and that's that. You turn into a rage monster whose only compunction is to throw yourself at other people and beat them to death.
And it doesn't seem like there's any cure. So
no. And
nobody has time to find one either. That's the other thing.
A couple of things really set this movie aside from other efforts like it, in that the absolute uncontrollable fury of these creatures, these former people that throw themselves bodily at you with no concern for themselves, that manifest a violence that is utterly feral and horrifying. There's a difference between two pugilists prancing around a ring and landing calculated blows against each other, and someone just ripping and tearing and shrieking, and it's horrible. The other thing that really sets this movie apart for me is Danny Boyle's use of silence.
Yeah.
It's not about jump scares with loud screeching violins that are just to manipulate you jumping in your seat.
Right.
This is something drops in the background and we see it, but the characters don't. And it's utterly quiet, and you're just dying in your seat like, oh God, please turn around, because this is like the most infectious plague ever. It's also brutally unafraid to drop its characters off. I mean, my God, especially the early moments of the movie. Now, some of the stunning things about this, it features a shot of London that is bereft of life. And they accomplished that by filming at like the break of dawn.
Yeah.
In
Dawn
tight shots. They were able to block off like small sections at a time. So they just kept the shots, tight and focused, and then put together. It makes it look like the city of London is utterly deserted.
Yeah.
Because this was a low budget indie movie. It was followed up in 2007 by 28 Weeks Later, director Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. Now, it's not the original. It is really good, though. It's got a great cast with all new people. It's Rose Byrne, Harold Perrineau, Idris Elba, Imogen Poots, and Robert Carlyle, speaking of Danny Boyle, and also an early turn from Jeremy Renner, speaking of before the MCU. It takes place, obviously, 28 weeks later. The Americans have moved in, and we've fixed everything. Just kidding. We created like a, fascist police state, and then it didn't work anyway because someone breaks quarantine and all shit kicks off. But there's this scene in 28 Days Later where, like one of the sergeants that's being held is like screaming this conspiracy theory that the rest of the world has walled off the island of the United Kingdom and been like, just let it happen. It's essentially what did happen. And 28 weeks later, you find out that's exactly what the world did. So
yeah.
I call it a franchise because it was recently announced that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland have sold, I believe they were pitching a trilogy. They've sold 2 movies. Danny Boyle's directing the first one, Alex Garland's writing, and then Alex Garland, I believe, is directing the second installment.
Cool.
So fuck yes. They've been talking about doing 28 Years Later for a long time. And listen, it has been 22 years since the first movie came out. Cillian Murphy has always been very public about revisiting his character, and I would love to. All of those people, I mean, Naomi Harris and Cillian Murphy have both gone on to have extremely successful careers.
Yeah.
As has Alex Garland. And
Danny
Boyle went on to win the Academy Award. So
it'll definitely be not a budget film.
I'm excited to see Danny Boyle return to horror because he made Sunshine, which sort of flirted with it, but he hasn't made a straight up horror movie since this. And the one horror movie he did changed the genre forever. So yeah, I'm excited.
Absolutely. Amazing.
Yeah.
So my next one.
This movie will make you afraid to look up also.
Yeah, right. My next film is from 2009, and it's what you explained earlier as your number one trope.
No.
What?
Oh, the first trope?
Yeah.
Everyone is dead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Called Carriers.
Oh yeah. The forgotten Chris Pine movie.
It's directed and written by Spanish brothers David Pastor and Alex Pastor. And it's starring Chris Pine, Piper Perabo, Emily Van Camp, and some others that I'll mention throughout. It's a survival horror film about 4 people fleeing a viral epidemic in the U.S. 2 brothers, Brian and Danny, along with Brian's girlfriend, Bobby, and Danny's friend, Kate. They're heading to where they think they can find shelter and wait for the pandemic to die out, a place called Turtle Beach, where Brian and Danny used to spend their holidays as a children. In order to survive, the group sets some rules, which I do love when there are rules.
Yeah, because that's just like the ticking clock, you know, like, oh, I can't wait for this one to be broken and to see how gross it gets.
Avoid contact with infected at all costs. Sanitize anything an infected person might have touched in the past 24 hours. There's nothing you can do to help the infected. They're already dead. If you follow these rules, you'll live. So
that's the exact same list of rules you give me when I have a cold.
So, as I mentioned, it's really, we're in the middle of the fall of the civilization, and Brian, played by Chris Pine, and Danny, played by Lou Taylor Pusey. They're driving around and they encounter people on the road, trying to find gas. I mean, essentially, that's what they spend most of the time doing.
And people are real dicks to each other in this movie.
Yeah, especially Chris Pine is really an awful character, but
which
understandably
I think is,
so, I guess.
It's an interesting movie because it's a decent film, but it was buried because it came out right around the same time J.J. Abrams' Star Trek did.
It's too bad,
which is
because
what Chris Pine, blew up.
You have to think about how you would be if you're trying to protect your little brother and your girlfriend and just trying to survive. So they pause on the road when they see an out-of-car gas, but refuse to help Frank.
An out-of-car gas? They have those?
Out-of-gas car, sorry.
Out-of-gas cars? Are you from the island of Madagascar?
But they refuse to help Frank, played by Christopher Maloney.
I'm back in the cellar, folks.
With his daughter, Jody, played by a young Kiernan Shipka.
See? That's what I'm talking. This movie is stacked.
And so they end up transporting them to a place where kids are supposed to be treated. But when they get there, they see that the doctor's been euthanizing children with poison Kool-Aid, and they get left behind because it's not part of their rules. And it's really hard to watch, and it's really sad, but it's also a question of what would you do to survive? This is the constant question. What would you do not to get sick?
A lot. I would do a lot.
They go to have a Dawn of the Dead moment of luxuriating on a golf course, breaking windows with golf balls, just to find that there are a bunch of decontamination suited survivalists who are having their own discussion on what to do with the girls.
Neat.
One of them is infected. They
them
drive away. They take care of the infected. And then essentially, Brian...
Don't give it away, folks.
...has to make some tough decisions.
It's bleak. It's a good movie. Bleak. I mean, it's not like the best, but it didn't deserve to be kind of dumped the way it was.
In the end, though, they get to the beach. The survivors get to the beach and find cockroaches swarming all over crabs.
Your favorite. Mm-hmm. Your favorite of favorites. Tune in next week for our cockroach episode.
I mean,
starring
here's the
only
thing with
me.
This film. It's pretty unassuming film. It's not overly violent. It has a young, attractive cast. The post-apocalyptic, changing their role in life. They can't be fuck-offs anymore. They have to actually be serious adults making adult decisions.
Yeah. That's what I'm waiting for to grow up.
But, their attempts to survive sometimes make things worse. And in the end... was it all for nothing?
Are we the real virus?
I mean, it came out in 2009, so, that's quite a long time ago.
Forever.
For spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But, spoiler alert,
now,
they don't all make it.
That young, handsome cast is now a handsome, middle-aged cast. My nextie is a really, really good one. It's a hidden gem that not enough people have seen. And I'm talking about 2008's Splinter from director Toby Wilkins, who should do more. This movie rules. So this little gem of a nasty creature feature and infectious movie, it fits the theme. It basically stars 3 people. It's a siege movie taking place in a gas station where the gas station attendant has been brutally killed in the opening moments of the movie.
One of your favorites.
Yes.
Shea Wiggum.
All right. Now, this movie is starring my boy Shea Wiggum back in 2008, playing his notable character of helpful asshole who somewhat redeems himself by the end. I think Shea Wiggum does that better than most people. Love you, Shea. So anyway, it's kind of fun to see him in 2008 because I feel like he's been lately, the last few years, people have finally caught on to the fact that he's awesome and he's getting cast in like bigger and bigger things, but he's always been great. So it's also got my spirit animal, Paul Costanzo. You might know him as the stoner guy from the millennial classic Road Trip.
Yeah.
I love this dude because he is half Italian and half Jewish, and as an Italian boy from Long Island, man, that is, I feel you, bro. So it's also got Jill Wagner, and this movie is about Shea Wiggum and his strung-out girlfriend carjack Paul Costanzo and Jill Wagner while they're on vacation and make them drive to a gas station. And along the way, Shea Wiggum, they hit an animal. And while he's changing the tire, he gets a splinter in his finger. And that'll come up later. So they, at this gas station, end up getting attacked by the former employee of the gas station who was attacked by the animal that they just ran over at the beginning of the movie. And he's all gnarly. So this thing is like a black mass of sharp spikes that rolls around.
Like a porcupine?
Kind of. But it's like a viscous fluid type thing. It's sort of like that ferro
that
fluid.
Bug?
That like that like liquid iron that if you magnetize it, it can take different shapes.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like that. It's really cool.
Like the stuff on the draw the beard on the the guy?
Yes, but all it takes, like metal shavings, but all it takes is one tiny little splinter to get in you, and it takes over. So this thing, the creature design is incredible, and what it does to you, the director said he wanted to display a parasitic creature that has zero understanding of the human anatomy. So when it's inside of you, it like tries to get you to do what it wants to do, but it doesn't understand how the body works. So he hired contortionists and gymnasts to be this body doubles for his actors, and they do. It's just they're being like pulled and wrenched in horrible directions.
Gross.
In this compulsion to spread. So it takes over parts of the body, like it gets in Shea Wiggum's arm. Now, it's very graphic, and it's gross, and it's very scary, and it's quite original. I don't think I've ever seen a monster like this before. But what really makes this movie stand out for me is, and I fucking love this so much, they use compassion in this movie, and no one suffers for it. Compassion actually saves the day. So Paul Costanzo's character, he plays a character that, and he gets called this a lot in the movie, a certain kind of man might call a pussy, because he's educated and he doesn't want to hurt people. Mm-hmm. So he actually, using his brain, finds out how to escape the creature. He shows compassion to the guy that carjacked him, which ends up saving everyone's life, and allows, Shea Wiggum the chance to like kind of redeem himself a little bit. But it's his like unwillingness to let people die or suffer, his curiosity and his wits and his kindness. Usually when you see that in a horror movie, it's a setup for that character to be like sacrificed in a very brutal but noble way.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen here. And it's lovely. I mean, it's nice to see kindness in a movie as something other than, and now he must die because he showed compassion. It always feels that way. So that's not to say that this isn't a gnarly fucking movie. It really is. The body cracking and like, bones breaking as this thing makes people twist in ways that the body doesn't twist. It's awesome. Great cast, really tense, amazing idea and design. And also, it's just that perfect combination of high concept, small budget. Yeah. So, tight focus with a big idea. And of course, that wonderful ending of any infestation movie where it's like, oh, it probably got out, didn't it? Yeah. So that's Great. Splinter.
Nice.
And you know what? I'm glad that they didn't make a sequel. Even though the ending sort of leaves it up like, oh, it could be, because I don't want to see a bigger story. I think what this movie succeeds in that it is a small tale with a tight focus that really draws you in and keeps you there.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I don't think that, it came out a long time
2008,
ago.
Yeah. Check out Splinter, everybody.
My last is another infection movie.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
From 2010. It's a remake, if you will, called The Crazies. So this version, the 2010, is directed by Breck Eisner. It's written by Scott Kosar, Ray Wright, and adapted from the original OG, George Romero.
Yes.
Who created the original Crazies in 1973, I believe.
Yes. So after Night of the Living Dead, but before Dawn of the Dead.
So it's starring Rhoda Mitchell and Timothy Olyphant.
Oh, what a cast. Listen, eternal love to Rhoda Mitchell. She is our queen.
Yeah,
she
really is.
She's just in the most badass shit. She's always cool.
Go back to our Crocs and Alligators.
Absolutely. You see Rhoda Mitchell in a movie, it's guaranteed to be fun.
So Breck Eisner decided to remake this former Romero film, and it really is realistic.
It's good. It's a good remake.
We're immediately thrown into a town that's panicking when a pandemic transforms normal people into murderous psychopaths. It's pretty depressing. It's pretty terrifying.
It's got some interesting pitchfork work.
It does. And it's about a small town sheriff named David Dutton, from Die Hard 4.0 and Perfect Getaway. Timothy Olyphant.
Oh, man. Yes, his most well-known projects.
I thought I'd just throw out some randos. And his pregnant wife, Judy, from Silent Hill and Surrogates.
Yeah. Silent Hill is good.
Yeah. And they are trying to figure out when this mysterious virus spread. The name of the town is Ogden Marsh. And it's like right in the middle of America, like farmland.
Yeah, it's like Kansas. Yeah, football. I mean, there's a pretty notable sequence that takes place in a football stadium.
So what happens with this infection is similar to what you were talking about with 28 days later, is it's uncontrollable bloodlust.
Yeah. That seems to be something we're afraid of.
They're compelled to kill their friends and families in horrible ways, like they're being possessed by this infection.
I think the real fear there is like, what if we all just lost all of our inhibitions, and the most logical explanation for that is a disease made us do it.
Exactly. So they can't really trust anyone. The Duttons try to fight for survival against this infection. The army comes in, and guess what? It's not helpful.
Oh,
they just
army?
Start blowing people up, blowing places up.
That does not sound like them. In all the commercials, they're handing out food.
And because this, was co-written by Scott Kozer, he wrote The Machinist as well. Yeah, that's some sick shit. It's packed full of panic and chaos,
paranoia, a lot of that
paranoia, but rightfully so, and also misguided trust.
Like The Machinist.
One of the scariest things for me was exactly how realistic it happens right away. People don't change too abruptly in front of you. It's sort of like they get infected and they slowly change, but I don't mean slow like days. I mean slow like hours.
So slow enough that
you're trusting this character.
Yeah, you might not know it at first.
Exactly.
Yeah. You might invite them into the bunker
until it's not subtle.
Yeah. That's a good point. There is a point at which it becomes extremely not subtle.
The makeup was really great on this film, and I think parallels have been drawn to this film being like the bird flu or swine flu.
Yeah.
And what happens to society when these outbreaks happen.
That is a pretty common theme with these infection movies, is it often goes further than just the disease itself to look at the effect that has on us, which interestingly enough seems to be something America as a whole is ignoring as we come out of 1 million people dying from the COVID pandemic, and we're all pretending like that wasn't a thing that happened.
Yeah, I think it's trauma.
It is.
And
absolutely.
Grief. But these gas mask military come in to restore order at all costs. Like I said, they're like blowing places
Very
up,
George
burning
Romero
things
theme.
down, starting over. And then you have that secondary assault coming. What happens though too is abuse of power, terrible things you must do, people being dehumanized and treating others like they never wanted to treat them.
Sure. And imagine that coming from someone you've known, trusted, and loved your whole life.
Exactly. So I did mention it's directed by Breck Eisner. He went on to do 14 episodes of The Expanse most recently.
Yes.
That's what he's been up to.
Yeah.
And it's
Fantastic
Michael Eisner's
show.
son.
Is it?
Yes.
How did I not know that? That is
know.
fantastic. Breck Eisner has been around for a while. He's a real, he's one of those directors I describe as like a
solid
a
working
workman's
director.
Yeah. Always turning in something solid, always enjoyable. We love the Breck Eisners of the world because they do the good work and they're not like super fucking showy about it.
And they have that, Nepo baby stuff to overcome.
Yeah.
That gets them in the door.
Oh,
But
yeah, tell me one
watch
industry
The
where having
Expanse,
connections
for real.
isn't.
It's a
fucking
legit.
great. Yeah.
It's
especially
show.
Since the books are modern classics, it's a legit adaptation of the first 2 arcs of that book series.
Yeah. But Crazies, check it out. It's good.
It's super good. Yeah.
You want to see Timothy Olyphant younger and cuter? Why not?
honestly, a man is aging very, very well.
He is.
Yeah.
Even with the infection.
You know about his infection?
Yeah.
He's trying to keep that private.
He's got the crazies.
He's got the, oh God, Timothy Oliphant really has the crazies. My last one is another, and this is, I'm recognizing that this is sort of a theme for me with some of my recommendations. It's a small little hidden gem coming from our twisted neighbors to the north, those crazy Canucks. Yeah, you know how like violent and bloodthirsty they are.
I know what this is.
I'm talking
begins with a P and ends with an L.
Yes, we watched this together,
we
you
did.
And I, and both of us really enjoyed it. We're talking 2008's Pontypool, directed by Bruce McDonald. Do not sleep on Pontypool. This movie is fantastic. You know, this is the answer to every struggling producer's dream of write me something high concept and exciting that costs nothing. That's what this movie is. It now Pontypool is the name of a small town in Ontario in which this takes place. And we follow in a single location, which is the inside of a radio recording studio.
I mean, it has to have been influenced by The Mist. I mean, it just has to have.
That's a good point. Now, it is based on a novel by Ted Burgess called Pontypool Changes Everything. By Tony Burgess. Well, I think
a trilogy novel.
Yeah, I think he has done more. Tony Burgess also adapted his novel and wrote the screenplay. And I'm actually going to get to the follow-ups in a second because I learned some things. But now the movie, like I said, it takes place in this radio studio. It follows shock jock DJ Grant Mazzy, which is an extremely DJ name. And that's played by legend Stephen McHattie.
He's so good.
He's so good all the time.
He essentially carries the whole movie.
Listen, Stephen McHattie is good in everything he does, but he usually plays a supporting role. This is his fucking magnum opus. He really does carry the majority of this movie based on just his performance. Mm-hmm. Which is largely sitting down, listening to phone calls and reacting to them.
And so this is the kind of film that I like because it's the knowing only being revealed through the main characters knowing.
Yes, we learn what's going on as the characters themselves learn it. We don't have foreknowledge. We don't have any dramatic irony as the audience. We are discovering what the fuck is happening as it unfolds. It's like a movie kind of takes place almost in real time. So basically, he plays this DJ, and he's in the studio with his assistant and his boss. And they're the only people there. And he gets a call from their radio helicopter reporter, this guy Ken. And he's telling a story about a riot that's happening in town. And it sounds pretty bad. And then he gets cut off. And they sort of move on. And then Ken calls back, and shit has happened. Mm-hmm. His helicopter's crashed. He sounds like he's really hurt. And he's talking about he's hinting at people doing very awful things to each other. It seems to be more than a riot. And then he changes. So the BBC contacts them and says, like, you seem to have broken like a major worldwide story. Like, this is happening at other places. Then it's through phone calls and sort of this frantic real-time research that you start to uncover that this is an outbreak of a disease transmitted through language. It's language itself, and it's actually been it's like a terrorist plot that's weaponized English or like the English language. So everyone is at risk of being infected, especially this man who is speaking over the radio
for a living.
Yes. So it's fascinating. It takes place, like I said, in this location, but it's so tense. It's so scary and interesting. Just because they're in the radio studio doesn't mean they're safe from this disease, which I said is passed by language. So it's just a high concept, fascinating idea that is so perfectly executed by the director and by the actors, specifically Stephen McHattie, just turns in an absolute tour de force performance. Now, this is a movie that focuses on sound a lot as horror. You really get a lot of the terror from listening to the noises in the background these calls and like trying to piece together what exactly is happening there. You don't get the whole story. I think it would be less frightening if you did.
Yeah, right.
You're left just with these horrific bits and pieces and being like, oh God, what is it? If you like this kind of stuff, I suggest a couple other movies. Brian De Palma's Blowout with John Travolta, Francis Ford Coppola's Oscar-winning The Conversation with Gene Hackman, and the more recent Peter Strickland film Berberian Sound Studio that really focuses on sound and sound design as the method of being, as the driver of the thriller. It's really cool. Pontypool's amazing. And in the I just found this out moments ago news, I guess McDonald, Burgess, and McHattie came back and collaborated on a quote-unquote spin-off called Dreamland in 2019. Like you said, I believe Tony Burgess did make some follow-ups to the novel. So Dreamland is not a horror movie. I haven't seen it. It's like described as a fantasy sci-fi. And I'm definitely going to check it out because I did not know that this was a loosely shared universe. Mm-hmm. But that said, you do not need to know or care about any of that to watch Pontypool. It is completely its own thing, except for there is an after credit scene that I guess leads up to the possibility of a spinoff, but you don't need that. It's amazing on its own. It is for all of you burgeoning filmmakers and writers out there wondering, how do I make something that is compelling and successful without anyone giving me money? You can't do better than this. This is a perfect example of not letting yourself be limited by the constraints around you, but using those to fuel your creativity. Yeah. So Pontypool.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great one. And, it's really mostly about this character, the DJ,
who, by the way, is not a great dude.
No, but he's an asshole.
Rises to the occasion.
He thinks like everybody, this is all like pranks at first.
Yeah, he
doesn't take it seriously.
He's a DJ shock jock, so he's exactly the kind of dude you'd think he is.
But coming out of Canada, this is a really good Canadian horror.
It is, like I've always said, keep your eye on those Canadians, okay? Yeah, sure. They act nice. And sure, their country's beautiful and they've got wonderful values in universal health care. And I love going there and the food is good. It's all an act. It's a long game, okay? They're just biding their time. They're an extremely patient people.
I don't think we have any Canadian listeners. So
that's a shame.
If you do and are Canadian, why don't you give us a listen, a like, or a 5-star review on any of the streaming platforms?
We would like to thank you.
And redact what my co-host Richard just said.
I would like to formally thank you on behalf of America for David Cronenberg.
Well, thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed this episode.
Hope you caught the enjoyment.
Hope you're infected with entertainment.
Oh God, I'm gonna I need a shower and then another one.
You sure do.
No, I just such heebie-jeebies. I watched so many things falling off of people in the last few days. Just parts that just
I told you
fall
not to
away.
Tell everybody about that.
I know.
All right, we have to go back in the basement.
All right, get the wet mop.
Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Suspanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're static.